In practically every multiverse, Invincible becomes an evil and ruthless conqueror who uses force to establish total dictatorship on Earth. But among the countless evil versions of Invincible, only one Mark Grayson, through incredibly fortunate circumstances, managed to break this vicious cycle. We're talking about the truly original Invincible. One of the key factors that determine the fate of Mark from the main universe is the late awakening of abilities. After all, Mark's Viltrumite abilities manifested only by age 17, which significantly delayed the moment of revelations from his father. From an early age, Mark was instilled with a great future in which he would become one of Earth's greatest superheroes, like his father, who selflessly protects and saves people from threats. But during the period of absence of any superpowers, Mark lived an ordinary human life, which largely formed his character, from which, already having abilities, he periodically puts himself in the place of other people and even villains, trying not just to delve into their problem, but to imagine how he would act. However, in parallel universes, everything could have unfolded differently if Mark's power had manifested slightly earlier. In such a case, Nolan's approach to raising his son would have changed radically. Instead of all the masks of an exemplary family man, he would immediately begin preparing Mark according to Viltrumite standards, instilling ideas of superiority and domination through force. And in such a case, the general perception of humanity would be as inferior beings who are incapable of achieving even a fraction of their power. 400 billion spent, and he only has a bloody nose. Such a Mark, deprived of years of human experience, would not possess moral guidelines. Perceiving his father's words as the only truth, he would have grown up with the conviction that conquest is the best option for Earth, in which people will be useful to the great empire, and that Earth is just the starting point in Mark's history. Just because of a small shift in the age at which Mark's power would have manifested, absolutely everything about his behavior could change, and in that case, he would not perceive his father's enslavement as betrayal, but as necessity. These versions of Mark would not have strong attachment to his mother, friends, or planet, unlike the main version, where human connections were his main support. Being raised as a Viltrumite, Mark would not see the point in creating any relationships with people, perceiving them as a waste of time or even a hindrance. But Nolan wouldn't have to convince him of the weakness of Earthlings. Mark himself would observe them in the process of growing up, only strengthening his thoughts about the weakness of people who require strict control. In many ways, a similar process of growing up was observed in Oliver, who, becoming stronger every day, only strengthened his thoughts about the helplessness and uselessness of most people. And although Nolan was absent during Oliver's growing up stage, even the very thought of domination lies deep in his subconscious. Life is a great gift. It cannot be taken away just like that. It's no gift. People constantly kill each other, and not someone like us, but ordinary people. With such upbringing, the most important conflict would not have arisen, in which Omni man shocked Mark with his revelations. After all, in the main reality, Mark's worldview collapsed not even when Nolan revealed the true reason for his stay, but precisely because of his attitude toward the surrounding people, from which Mark's first reaction was resistance. After all, everything he fought for, in his father's eyes, was a waste of time, since compared to the Viltrumite, human life is no more than a bright flash. But in worlds where Mark was raised as a Viltrumite from childhood, there is no betrayal, only duty. He doesn't need to be persuaded to join the Empire. He's already a Viltrumite. If Omni-Man had acted patiently rather than cruelly, he could have gradually undermined Mark's resistance, proving that the Viltrumite way is not only necessary, but the highest justice. Mark's main problem is that he's vulnerable to persuasion. He always doubted himself, wondering whether he had enough strength, intelligence, or ability to make the right decision. In timelines where his father feeds these doubts rather than breaks him physically, Mark could convince himself that rebellion is meaningless and Earth is doomed without his dictatorship. After all, his father is not a monster, but a ruler. Instead of resentment, he would feel enlightenment, voluntarily accepting the Viltrumite heritage. But even without direct influence from his father, there are other paths leading Mark to fall. For example, premature death of his mother, hatred toward Eve, or loss of closest friends. Such versions of Mark lose their main anchor. After all, their deep attachment to people is simultaneously both their greatest strength and most vulnerable point. What a strong connection? You won't see that among Viltrumite. That's weakness. In other realities where Mark's loved ones die, he not only loses those he loved, but his very essence. Emotions begin to seem like useless weakness that only brings eternal suffering. Some of these Marks even begin to despise their human part, seeing in it the source of all troubles. And without anyone who could remind them of the value of humanity, they decide it's better to abandon it altogether. In addition, the Viltrumite also play a significant role. In many worlds, Marks choose the side of evil, not by their own conviction, but are simply forced to submit. After all, the Viltrumite are an empire of ruthless tyrants, and if Mark faces their invasion, he won't have a single chance. After all, there are simply no worthy opponents on Earth for him to train against, and facing even the weakest Viltrumite, Mark won't have sufficient preparation, from which he may prefer survival to heroism. Mark was always ready to suffer for others. But in those realities where Earth is attacked by the Viltrumite, there will be no other outcomes except death or submission. In such a case, Mark can convince himself that the only way to save the planet is to take it under strict control, seeing himself not as a villain, but as a necessary savior from a worse fate. However, the most terrible versions of Mark are those who never even tried to resist. From birth, they were raised as purebred Viltrumite who have no doubts about the Empire's path. And most importantly, they don't have a mother like Debbie who could remind them that their humanity is not weakness. Such Marks become ideal warriors, even more fanatical than Omni Man himself, who at one time wavered due to attachment to family. These versions know neither pangs of conscience nor internal conflicts. They believe in the Viltrumite way from birth. And yet, in the multiverse, variants of good Mark are possible, but with greater probability they are systematically destroyed, since he's still in the early stage of becoming a hero, and Mark faces an unbearable burden. On one hand, the still immature Mark needs to oppose his father, in case of disobedience, to whom his father quickly takes matters into his own hands. And if Mark manages to defeat Omni-Man, he won't stop at one killing and will decide that it will be much easier to exterminate his own enemies who are capable of causing pain. But even with a moral code, the threat from Viltrumite won't go anywhere. It's precisely because of the cruel world of Invincible that he simply doesn't have time to unlock his own powers, which is why most Invincibles turn to the side of evil. But what truly defines Mark in the main universe is Debbie. She played a key role in forming Mark's morality. It's no coincidence that in the War of Invincibles, one of the most adequate Marks was precisely the one who wanted to return his mother to his own universe. Thanks to proper upbringing and moral teachings, he doesn't kill his own opponents, but only tries to minimize their damage. And through endless clashes with opponents, Mark becomes stronger each time, not only physically, but emotionally. And with each minor defeat, he gains invaluable experience that he implements in difficult moments. It is defeat and humanity that shape Invincible. Comment down your thoughts and subscribe for more Invincible breakdowns, and I'll see you in the next one.